And the meeting is live.
Welcome, everyone. This is the Board Legislative Committee meeting of the East Bay Regional Park District on Friday, December 16th, beginning at 12:41. We are now open, and I apologize for the late start. We're having some technical issues here, but I think we can all hear each other now, and we're ready to go. So I will ask our recording secretary, Flora Sanchez, to take the roll.
Hello, everyone. I believe you can hear me. Welcome to the Legislative Committee meeting. Chair Eccles.
Present.
Director Lane.
Present.
Director Waspy.
Present.
Also present among staff, we have General Counsel Borgo. We have AGM Deborah Ocker. We have Katie Hornbeck, staff, Brian Holt, staff, and Dr. Ana Alvarez, Deputy General Manager, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs, Eric Feeler, also present in the meeting. We also have staff supporting from Prime Gov and our state advocate, Doug Houston, and federal advocate, Peter Umhofer, and from Information Support Services, Dave Butler. I am going to ask Dave, can we pull down the meeting host recording that's up there? It's on our other computer, and I believe you all can't see each other as well as we can. Thank you for bearing with us. So unless I've missed anyone, that is roll call. I can also state the ways that members of the public can join and submit public comment. The East Bay Regional Park District holds meetings through entirely virtual or hybrid in-person attendance. The Board of Directors, designated staff, and limited members of the public can participate in person at Park District headquarters or through the Park District's virtual platform via Zoom. Members of the public are strongly encouraged to wear masks inside district facilities. The Park District is providing live audio and video streaming. And for those members of the public not attending in person, public comment may be submitted 1, live via Zoom, or 2, via email sent to myself, fcsontos@ebparks.org, or 3, via voicemail, 510-544-2024, as noted on the agenda. If there are no questions about meeting procedure, we can begin.
Great. Thank you so much, Flora. Well, I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Ana Alvarez. She is first on our agenda for Deputy General Manager's comments. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Director Eccles. Just wanted to take a brief moment and acknowledge the holiday season and say that it's been quite a year for 2023 and much to the work that has been accomplished through the board's legislative committee. I'm sorry. The legislative agenda at the state level as well as the national level towards conservation and environmental stewardship has been just tremendous and unprecedented. It's been quite a year, and we anticipate that this momentum will continue, and we're more than ready to, and we have been rising to the moment. And so it's been a very busy year, and I just wanted to make that acknowledgement, Director Eccles. I look forward to 2024, and I'll be working more closely with the committee as we start now implementing many of the initiatives that are coming out of these legislative agendas, both at the state and federal level. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. Okay, we're moving on to our Government and Legislative Affairs report. Eric, would you like to lead off with that?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the committee, thank Dr. Alvarez and the general manager for all the work this year, particularly acknowledging that we've taken positions on 28 state bills and 12 federal just in this year alone, including 124 advocacy letters. So quite a bit of work just out of the committee, in addition to all the other great work we've been working on. And I also really want to particularly thank Beverly for your years of service and really appreciate you serving on this committee several times and always being such a great advocate for the Park District and always being willing to go and meet with our electeds at a moment's notice, and sometimes even just spontaneously talking to them about, oh, I don't know, grants and the Tiger Grant program and things like that. So really appreciate your work and leadership for the Park District. And I think I'll ask Flora to make an acknowledgement.
Okay, we have invited one or two special guests just to say a thank you to Director Lane. We wanted to keep it a bit of a surprise. I see our first guest in the Zoom room. Can you hear us all right, Supervisor Anderson?
I can hear you very, very well, and I'm delighted to be here. And Beverly, I feel like we say goodbye to you more than I ever want to. You have just done so much for our community, and particularly as a Danville resident myself and someone who served on the town council with you many years after you served. You and your original council members laid the foundation for so much open space in Danville, for hillsides, for the things that the people in our community value so much. And years ago, when I was still on the town council, we were celebrating our sesquicentennial of Danville, our 150th anniversary. And Beverly wrote this wonderful book. And at the book signing, I remember saying, when I grow up, I want to be just like Beverly. She has just done such an amazing job in all that she does, her selfless service to the community. But what I have with me today, and with Zoom, it's hard to see it. It's even harder to see it when it's upside down. This is a proclamation passed by the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors this past Tuesday, Beverly, honoring you, recognizing you for your tremendous service to the community in so many different ways. And I'm going to be dropping this off at your house so you can adorn it on, I hope you have a trophy wall somewhere in your house, because you certainly must have many, many proclamations that many of our special districts agencies have offered to you for your tremendous service. And particularly East Bay Regional Park District, you have made such a difference as we've made sure parks were accessible, open to the community, and distributed throughout all of our communities in such a way that we all can use and enjoy them. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Candace. Someone pulled out the book this morning when we were looking at a mural for the clock tower.
Yes.
Just down from your office.
Yes, Vintage Danville, the wonderful book that we all treasure.
And so they went off, the muralist went off with the book.
Wonderful. Well, no, and what I love about Beverly, besides all her public service, is that she is such a true historian. And anytime we need any facts, particularly in the San Ramon Valley, but it's expanded really through all of Contra Costa, Beverly is just the person to go to. And her sharp recollection, she doesn't generally even have to look something up. She just knows off the top of her head exactly who was where at one given time. And of course, 2 years ago, she wrote a wonderful book about the history of Alamo, which is a very helpful thing for our community there as well, because there's so many legends that are out there of why something is the way it is. So I think our historical community as well has so much thank you for. So thank you for your years of service.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for
much, Supervisor
joining.
Anderson.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Supervisor. We have one more guest on the line who I'm going to admit, and hopefully audio will cooperate. Barb, can you hear us all right?
I can hear you just fine. Thank you, Flora.
We hear you very well. Please introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barb Johnson. I'm still assisting retired Congressman George Miller in his work past his time in the Congress. And he is so very, very sorry. His meeting in San Francisco this afternoon got switched. and he is not able to call in on his own. But Director Lane, he is so thrilled to be able to extend his congratulations on a career that has an endless list of boards and foundations, all of your work directed at expanding and improving the experience of parks and our community as a whole in so many ways. In the early days of earmarks, way back when, staff would collect projects around the district to present to George for his consideration of funding. And the East Bay Regional Parks projects were always at the top of the list, not just because of George's love for the environment and his commitment to it, but because he knew coming from the park board, it would be stellar and the best use of federal funding. And you, Director Lane, for decades have been meticulously careful with federal funding, and the good reason why those projects that you brought to George always managed to make the list. We both wish you the very, very best in your retirement. I will say that still working with George, retirement isn't always as leisure as the workaday world, but I'm sure that you will find a great balance. And George would, he'll be sending a note to you personally, but wishes you the very, very best for a long and healthy and happy retirement. And thank you from all of us on his staff for the work that you've done over the years, making the parks and the experience of parks such a great part of our lives and our families' lives. So congratulations on your retirement, and wish you the very, very best. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for that tribute. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you for
Well,
joining.
Well, thank you for the invitation. And again, George will be sending a note to you, Beverly, as soon as he gets back into the district. So again, congratulations.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you so much for making time to join. It's really appreciated. We have some video remarks that we're going to try to play over the audio setup. If it doesn't work, I will simply send it to Director Lane, but I think we can give it a try. Do you mind trying it from the podium? Yeah, I think we can. We're going to try it, give it a few seconds. If it doesn't cooperate, then there are other simple methods, but we would truly love to share this with the committee members while they're present and with Director Lane here during the meeting. we'll plan to send it to Director Lane.
Yeah, I can do it.
Oh, sure.
Remove the screen from
Oh, I see
everybody.
what you mean. Okay, sure. And so that's our final guest is via video remarks, Congressman Mark DeSaulnier, who is also a big fan of Director Lane and her incredible legacy and her service.
Hey, everybody.
This might work. Yeah, looks good,
Hey,
Dave.
everybody.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad we were able to get that video to work.
Well, thank you for asking them to speak. I didn't really expect that today. But I appreciate your work putting it together. Thanks.
Okay, Eric, are you ready? Oh.
Older.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the delay. Eric Feeler, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs. Pleased to be here today to present our 2023 legislative program overview. First, want to thank the board and general manager for inspiring this review of the legislative program, and thank Dr. Alvarez for her leadership. And then importantly, I want to thank the entire team. There's now four members of the legislative and government affairs team, and particularly want to acknowledge Lisa Baldinger, who's not able to be with us today, although don't feel bad for her because she's probably on a beach somewhere, for her great work on pulling this together, and Flora and Yuli as well. So just to sort of have an overview of the overview, we are, as I mentioned, the team of three. A team of four. We primarily do analytical work and advocacy for funding and policy decisions. We develop and maintain strategic relationships with elected leaders and other agencies. And then we do the research for survey work for the Park District, and not necessarily related directly to legislative and government affairs. We are also managing the Park Advisory Committee. Out of our delegations, we have quite a number of electeds to stay in touch with and communicate with. This is our Board of Supervisors, a couple new faces there, Lena Tam in Alameda County, and Ken Carlson in Contra Costa County. Already had to reach out to Ken Carlson's office. He's retaining some of Supervisor Mitchoff's staff, and we'll be having a introductory meeting with him very soon. And then our assembly offices, some new faces there, relatively new. Lori Wilson came in on a special election last year or earlier this year, and now has been elected for a full term. And then Liz Ortega is our new representative in District 20, which was former Assembly Member Bill Quirk's district. State Senate, we have a couple new faces. Aisha Wahib from sort of the southern Alameda County was Bob Wajkowski's Senate seat. And then coming from the Central Valley, Susan Tamales Eggman is going to be representing a big part of the Tri-Valley, at least on the Alameda County side. So it'll be interesting and exciting to work with her. She's fairly senior on the Senate Appropriations Committee. So that'll be a good working relationship for us to have. Then in Congress, also a couple new faces, actually a new old face, Representative John Garamendi, who for a while represented parts of Contra Costa County in the congressional seat that Representative DeSaulnay now holds. He's now going to be representing kind of that northern Contra Costa County waterfront area. And then also just a sliver of Josh Harder's district will swing into Discovery Bay. That's a seat that formerly was held by Representative Jerry McNerney, who retired. And just in terms of the goals and the advocacy categories that we focus on and we tie everything to, well, first and foremost, we tie everything to the board's mission, the Park District's mission and the board's goals. And we have our overarching principles that include equity and climate resiliency and having an environmental ethic. And then new for this year, we added inclusive interpretation and educational opportunities. And those are items like we took a position on a new park for Cesar Chavez. That really is more of a inclusive or interpretation and educational opportunity than some of our other categories would highlight. So we added that. And then obviously ensuring the fiscal health of the Park District. And then on the right-hand side are our 7 main advocacy goals. They're not new. They're the same goals we had last year, but do want to acknowledge, since we're acknowledging Beverly's great work, her support and assistance in putting together the one sentence descriptions for each of the 7 advocacy goals. Locally, we're going to be working primarily focusing on sea level rise and working with other agencies, including BCDC and their Bay Adapt program, recognizing that Dr. Alvarez has been involved in that for some time, as well as the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority's Advisory Committee, but truly seeking to have partners in the work for shoreline resiliency. As you can see here, the photo of Robert W. Cowan Memorial Beach is eroding again, just a few short years after we replenished the sand. And so in order to continue to maintain shoreline properties and build support for sea level rise and resiliency and managed retreat, we really need partners and additional funding resources. So we'll be highlighting that as we continue to talk to our state and local and federal, frankly, partners. And then I did want to mention we will be highlighting as a continued high priority our wildfire resiliency work. As you can read here, including the ecologically sensitive vegetation management, we were successful in the state budget in creating a $80 million grant program for that type of work, and really looking to submit applications and see if we already have a pilot project working with California Native Plant Society and Reinhardt Redwood, and we want to build upon that work as we move forward and try to build more resilient and drought tolerant environments. And continue to do our work on health as we move out of the severity of the pandemic, although I know cases have moved back up. We did learn the importance for both physical and mental health that our parks and trails play, and they continue to play. And we look to partner with additional health departments and transportation agencies to highlight that important need that the Park District fulfills for East Bay residents and residents of the Bay Area. At the state level, we'll be continuing, and I believe Dr. Alvarez alluded to this in the beginning, that we'll be continuing our work on the 30 by 30 goals as those goals become more attached to funding. Funding was adopted this year somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple billion for some of the wildfire work that would be highlighted in 30 by 30, but there will be other opportunities, including access and land acquisition, that we will be focusing in on. The funding will be coming largely through existing programs, but the priority on meeting the goals of 30 by 30 will be considered throughout all the different funding opportunities. And then at the request of the general manager, we were working with Mid-Peninsula Open Space to raise the administrative limit for agencies like ours that are equivalently sized to counties and larger cities. There'll be more on another slide on that coming up in the presentation. And then continuing to work on ADA accessibility and funding. This particular reference on this slide was with Eduardo Garcia's legislation on playgrounds, but we're also going to be looking at potentially increasing grant opportunities for ADA upgrades throughout the Park District, and that'll also come on another slide. At the federal level, we are going to be submitting a RAISE grant. This is the Federal Transportation Competitive Grant Program. It's the sort of the Tiger II legacy. I believe, Peter can correct me if I'm wrong later, but I believe there's 1.5 billion made available. We just received that announcement yesterday. So we'll be submitting a number of the projects that we submitted 2 years ago. We are taking out the 2 projects that did not score as highly, with the hope that based on the feedback we received from the Department of Transportation, that we will have a solid application and be submitting that sometime this spring. And then additionally, seeking additional wildfire resiliency funding through FEMA. at the federal level, and obviously there's additional funding at the state level. And we have already begun conversations with Representative Barbara Lee on directive language for the Army and the state agencies to resolve the issues of cleanup of the marine sediment at Judge John Sutter Regional Shoreline. That's an issue that's been ongoing for a number of years. And as Brian Holt is tired of hearing me say, I've been to the Pentagon more times on this issue than any other issue that I can imagine. So we really want to resolve it. The other issue that's sort of a new one to me and exciting is that there's federal attention to grassland conservation and recognizing the wildfire risks of grassland and also the role that grasslands can play in building resiliency to climate. And so we'll be seeking to work on that legislation and make sure that special park districts would be eligible for funding. And then as we look toward potential new opportunities in 2024, we'll be spending some time in 2023 doing the analytical work that Lisa is leading, both for survey work that would consider a district-wide ballot measure, parcel tax for funding of fire and operations and stewardship services. Additional staffing was identified in a series of listening sessions that we did with other departments and divisions. And it was clear that finding additional resources for staffing needs is something that is throughout the district a need that we want to continue to work toward addressing. Then one other area that we heard loud and clear from our colleagues and also from the general manager and deputy general manager is, quite frankly, to not be treated like a developer when it comes to CEQA and doing our restoration work. So we'll be looking at potential modifications that could benefit the park district as we seek to do restoration and enhancement work and not necessarily be delayed as long as we have been on some of these efforts by the permitting process. And then again, we have a goal of meeting and developing working strategic relationships with park commissions throughout the region, and obviously try to expand our work with our city partners, particularly on the notion of sea level rise. As we seek to look for advocacy in Sacramento and our advocacy days coming up in January 31st and February 1st, one high priority that we'll be mentioning to every office that we meet with is the California Conservation Corps has submitted a budget request to develop a permanent facility at Bollinger Canyon Holly Court on land that is part of Las Trampas Regional Wilderness. It's a historically was a Corps camp, and before that, I believe CAL FIRE base. So there is a history, but it needs to be modernized, and it will be eventually a fairly expensive project, but it has risen to the top of the priority list for the Conservation Corps themselves. So they will be making the budget ask, and then we will be talking to our electeds about supporting that budget ask. And then again, on the administrative limit, that'll be something that we'll be mentioning to each of our members of our state delegation. Very hard to read this, but these are our state member asks. You'll note that not every ask this time is direct funding, and that is with a keen eye toward the budget process and revenues that are not coming in at the level that they historically came in last year. And when I say historically, I mean it was a history-breaking year, and we don't expect to see that again. And so we're being modest with some of our direct funding asks, but have identified, as I mentioned earlier on the CEQA front, that cutting the green tape is something that we can work on with Assembly Member Bauer Cahan's office. Both her and one of her lead staffers are CEQA attorneys, so a good opportunity to work with them on some modifications. And then another issue that's new, I believe, to this group is the Crandall Creek Bridge. That would be a bridge to go for folks to view at the Dust Marsh. And I had to look up what the Dust Marsh was to understand. And it was a demonstration urban stormwater transformative marsh. And that was something that continues to be monitored as it accepts more sentiment and filters it out before it gets into the bay. But it's also a great viewing area for fish and waterfowl and birds. And then the Crandall Creek, or that's the one I just mentioned. There's the project up in Wildcat Creek that is removing a cement barrier and building a couple of ADA accessible bridges and a fish ladder and restoring some shoreline along the creek to restore the flow and hopefully the flow for the fish and trout. So these are in your packet, and we'll continue to have more detailed construction conversations about them moving forward, but wanted to just make sure that we shared them. At the federal level, as I mentioned, we will be submitting a RAISE grant application. I believe, Director Lane, that we are working on a different photo for the front of the application, so hopefully we will find one. And then as we look at each individual office, Peter can mention more about this moving forward, but there does seem to be the opportunity for community project funding, benefit project funding moving forward, which is essentially direct member allocations. And so we will be again asking our senators for funding for wildfire and then also the Judge John Sutter issue with Senator Padilla. And recalling how active Representative John Garamendi was in the Tiger II conversation, we wanted to see if he would again be our quarterback, so to speak, for the RAISE application and work with the rest of our delegation to support that. And the Marsh Creek is not new, but the grassland wildfire mitigation is new, and that's something that we're excited to explore with our new representative, Josh Harder. And the other projects here are basically ones that we had advanced this year. And with that, this is your team. And this is very happy to answer questions, take questions and comments. But this is an item that we were actually hoping to get approval from the committee on to bring to share with the full board, hopefully at the January 17th meeting prior to us engaging in advocacy in Sacramento at the end of the month, and then obviously our DC advocacy in March. So with that, I will be happy to answer additional questions or take comments.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. A really wonderful report. Very exciting. A lot to look forward to. And a lot that we've covered this year as well. So Director Lane or Director Waspy, do you have questions, comments?
No question, just a comment. I thank you. I appreciate all the work your staff does, and I'm glad you're expanding and it's expanding in the right direction. I'm always amazed at your project lists and your zealousness getting things done, and I appreciate it. I look forward to this year.
Yeah, my thanks too. And I think we're doing very well at trying to tailor our asks to our legislators, which I think is really important. And good news to hear that the Conservation Corps is looking at Holly Court as a priority. And so for that one, and of course, anything having to do with Thurgood Marshall, I hope you'll give the new director a call and a briefing on that. I don't know whether he'll want to be on legislative committee or not, but he's had a lot of experience in advocacy. And so I think he'll come right in nicely. And he did get I gave him a drive-through tour of Holly Court at one point. So he's at least seen the street. I have not seen any extra information about it. So always good to have a final report. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you. Director Wasp, oh, you already went ahead, Director Wasp. Okay, so yeah, thank you. I also want to thank staff for the report and for all of your incredible work. Really appreciate your commitment and resilience, and good to see a team of 4. Good to see that you're growing. And I did have one specific question. I was just interested knowing a little bit more about the project that Senator Eggman might be working on, the statewide grant program for ADA access enhancements. And that's, I mean, that's a really huge, important area. So I'm glad to see that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We'll be getting to know the senator. I had the opportunity to work with her a little bit when she was on the Stockton City Council. She is very much interested in equity and access. So we thought we would start with the ADA request because it was identified in our listening sessions with staff, which just to sort of elaborate on that, we had a series of conversations with different divisions and on different topics, and the seven advocacy goals, and had cross-divisional input. And based on those conversations is where these priorities came from. In addition to vetting with other members of management, the hope would be that the ADA ask would be something that would be a good starting point with her in her office. There has been a need identified. There was some legislation this year or earlier this year that did identify playground equipment needing to be ADA accessible moving forward. So we see that as a step in the right direction and potentially an opportunity to provide additional funding. And we do, whenever we do a park improvement project, we do consider ADA and include it, but it would be good if there was additional funding so that other contractors could come in and do some of that work through potentially a state grant program. So that is the opportunity and the hope there with Senator Eggman.
Great, thank you.
And Director Lane, just to your comments, yes, we will definitely keep the new director, brief him on the Holly Court and Thurgood Marshall requests and updates. I did not mention that we are, and maybe Katie will touch on this as she presents on grants, that we are working on being in contract for the $3 million from Assemblymember Grayson for south of Bailey Road. And then and I'll let Peter discuss this later, but there's a decent opportunity and chance that the $3 million ask Representative DeSaulnay submitted for historic review of the building at Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50, that is thought to be a candidate for visitor center. That $3 million request is also potentially moving forward. And I believe the NDAA was literally just signed or just passed today or maybe late yesterday. So I'm looking forward to Peter's comments on that coming up.
Okay.
So with that, could we ask for a potential recommendation to advance the overview forward?
Sure. Would someone like to make a motion for that?
All right, I would move that we send this forward with a committee recommendation.
And I would second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would our recording secretary like to call the roll?
Absolutely. Chair Eccles,
Aye.
Director Lane,
Aye.
and Director Waspy. Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. We're looking forward to 2023.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. So next up, we have Brian Holt and Nomi Laval on local issues, actions taken by other jurisdictions.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails, and GIS. Naoma is not able to join us today because it's her birthday. So she's doing something I'm sure more fun. Not that this isn't fun, but something else. Thanks for having me. Sorry I can't be there in person today, but I'm going to give you a quick update just on a couple of the local actions that we are tracking through our interagency process here. So are you able to see my screen there?
Yes, looks
Mhm.
good.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the first item we're going to touch on is the City of Concord has held a couple public workshops on a draft term sheet with the Concord First partners who are the current prospective master developers for the portion of the Concord Naval Weapons Station that is slated for development. So they will be holding a special city council meeting on that on January 7th, and that's when the term sheet will be decided. So the term sheet goes through and spells out just a lot of details regarding the negotiations between the city and the development team. And part of that is the phasing of what would be developed. So their proposal doesn't necessarily differ much from a footprint point of view from what was approved, what now seems like a long time ago, 2012, when the area plan was adopted. But it does increase the number of total housing units by about 3,500 units. So I think it's a total of 15,575 houses that are now proposed within the plan, and then a number of commercial development, university campus, and various types of sort of R&D types of uses. It does spell out a number of investments in community benefits, and stipulates sort of how utilities would be constructed on the property, what roadway improvements would be made. Of note for us, and we have met with them, is a commitment to bring utilities to our property line that could eventually serve utilities for the Thurgood Marshall Regional Park and the future visitor center on the site. They have, and Director Lane will recall this, ensured that we do have access to our park from the north through the tournament sports park that is proposed. And then from an investment point of view, well, I should say the other thing that the other commitment that is included in there is interim closure of the Contra Costa Canal Trail, the gap between the Contra Costa Canal Trail, which ends on the sort of southern side of the property, and the Delta de Anza Trail. So they've committed to try to attempt to connect those two trails together in phase one. From a community benefits investment point of view, they have committed a total of $100 million to build out the tournament park and the citywide park that you can see located, that would be adjacent to our regional park, and have also committed another $65 million to a community center slash library, which the community has wanted a library in Concord for many years. So those are kind of two big major park and community facility investments that sort of, jumped out at me there. So again, this is sort of the land plan that is there. So you can see pretty similar to what was approved before, with higher density near the BART station and lower density as you go through the property. And then the two big park sites located adjacent to our regional park on the east side of the creek, the tournament park and the citywide park. So we have, like I say, we have met with them. We continue to meet with the city. Next steps will be January 7th. This term sheet will go to the city council. If the city council votes to accept the term sheet, then it becomes a negotiation between the city and the master developer, and the U.S. Navy regarding the terms of a disposition and development agreement for the economic development conveyance property. So with that, I'll just acknowledge Director Lane's many decades of service on this project, having served on the Community Advisory Committee many years ago. So thank you for all your leadership on this one for a long time. Any questions on this project before I move on?
Thank you for that, Brian. And I know you've shared those years. So anyway, what I'm wondering about, I have two questions. One is, by adding the additional dwelling units, does that mean a reduction in other functions that were originally planned for this property?
No, the way they've achieved the higher units is not necessarily taking away from any green space or any other functions of this property. It's really just trying to accommodate more density within those areas that were already zoned for residential.
Okay, and then my second one is that since there's been a change in the council, what would happen if they rejected the term sheet?
I don't want to go too far down the sort of speculation, but if they were to reject the term sheet, I suppose they could vote to continue to negotiate with this master developer to try to continue to get to an acceptable term sheet. And I guess they could vote to also abandon this developer and reopen the master developer selection. So I think it's really all options would be on the table, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No other questions. I'll go on to our next one here. Pleasanton. So as you're all aware, a lot of interest in mountain biking at Pleasanton. We have brought this forward to the legislative committee before. We're watching this because, of course, we're continuing to have a lot of discussions around trails and mountain bike access within our park district. The city of Pleasanton, within the city park, the Augustin Bernal Park, have moved forward with a bid and are moving into construction for a downhill mountain bike trail. So this would not be within our property. This is within the city's Augustin Bernal property, but would ultimately connect up to the ridge trail that goes through Pleasanton. So it's likely that cyclists would potentially, ride up the hill through our park and then down this mountain bike trail through Augustin Bernal Park. So you can kind of see the black line sort of shows, generally where that alignment is. And this is, you can't necessarily see it real well, but this is the design where it's got sort of a number of sort of features through here, including a rock drop and some other sort of features that are attractive to the mountain biking community. And then they're also looking at deconstructing some existing trails there through the property. So we'll continue to monitor this, see how it relates to access use within the park. My hope is that it addresses some of the demand at Pleasanton in a way that, like I say, people can travel up our fire roads and get up to the ridge and then go down the city's trail and meet some of that demand that's there. Any questions on this one?
Yeah, I have one. So it's only downhill?
Only downhill, correct.
Can mountain bikers get uphill from Augustine Bernal on some other trail?
Director Lane, that's a good question, and I'm not sure. I would need to look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, I know there's a hiker trail
Yeah,
that is in existence now, but I don't know if it's hike bike.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I'll need to look into that.
All right, thanks.
And Brian, if I could ask a question. So when I know that they're planning construction, do you know when they plan to complete construction or when the construction will be complete and they'll have mountain
It's
bike?
not a really long construction window, so I don't know exactly, but I think it's expected to be complete sometime this summer or so. So I'll need to look.
Okay.
Okay, so shifting over to the City of Martinez, these were two items that were of interest to Director Coffey. The first was certification of the EIR and adoption of the Martinez General Plan to take them through 2035. Just I guess an interesting fact, the existing general plan for the City of Martinez dates back to 1973. So I think it was ripe and fresh for an update. But one of the items that came up, there was some concern about some of the property that's adjacent to Martinez Regional Shoreline that's located north of the railroad tracks. So the general plan had originally designated these areas for housing. There are various agreements that the Park District has with the City of Martinez that actually restricts these areas for housing. And of course, we had concerns about any environmental impacts or anything else related to that. And of course, we reminded the city of those, that MOU that we have with the City of Martinez. Ultimately, their planning commission agreed that these sites north of the railroad tracks, adjacent to and surrounded by Martinez Regional Shoreline wouldn't be appropriate for housing, and they removed those designations. So, so they moved forward with the general plan and are now working on their housing element. The second project in Martinez is there's a community workshop held October 26th. There'll be another one coming up soon, but they're doing a land use plan for the Martinez waterfront. So that is the there's a portion of city-owned property that includes the marina and a bait shop and the harbor master. So they're doing a full land use plan for all of this city-owned property. Again, that's completely surrounded by us and our regional park. And then I don't think you can, this isn't the best map, but this, as you may be aware, Director Coffey is well aware, these sports fields that are located here are actually on Park District property. So these are properties that are operated by the City of Martinez, but we are the underlying fee owner. So part of our property is included in this land use plan. I have met with the City of Martinez and provided just some general comments on the types of uses that we would like to see and the types of uses that we wouldn't want to see. There's been some interest in looking at some sea level rise and adaptation projects, trying to find ways to, like lots of cities, Martinez has had a challenge with dredging and maintenance and operations of the marina. So trying to find some uses to activate that shoreline. So looking at, we're discussing some, whether it's a B&B type of use or hotel. We've seen different uses proposed in the past. So we'll see what they come back with in their initial plans and be able to respond back. Interesting, there was some question about if there was environmental education centers and that type of use, and actually suggested that they go and take a look at Big Break. And if that might be a use that they would like to see on the shoreline here. I actually think that would be a nice use that would be complementary to our park. But so we'll continue to monitor that as that gets developed. And then last one here, which I know Director Lane is well familiar with. This actually dates back to October 27th, but I don't think we discussed it last time, is the Danville Design Review Board provided comments on some of the architecture and landscape plans related to the TrueMark development. Pretty consistent with some of the comments that we provided to try to make the housing have a bit more of an agricultural feel and a bit more consistent with our park area. So I think TrueMark is taking in those comments and we'll be coming back. We'll be coming back again at some point. So. And again, that's that location, which we were all out at just recently to discuss during a board field trip. So those are the hot projects that we're among many, but the ones that we're wanted to share with you today that we're tracking through our interagency planning program. So happy to answer any questions, and if there's anything else that we should be aware of, please feel free to let me know.
Thank you, Brian. Would Director Lane, go ahead. Oh, you're done? Okay, Director Waspy, did you have any further comments? Okay, well, I would just like to thank you, Brian, for the report. And it's really exciting to see all the wonderful work that you're doing with the various cities and other local entities. And I am really happy that we've added, this is new this year, of adding the local jurisdiction issues to this committee agenda. And I find it incredibly helpful. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to come and provide this information, because it really does, it is a critical part of the sort of big picture. So thank you.
I appreciate the feedback, and if any suggestions are always welcome. This was the first year, so I'm happy to take any input as well. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
And happy holidays, all of you.
You too. Okay, so moving on, we have our funding and grants update, and I think we have, oh, I see Katie Hornbeck on the Zoom.
Yes. Mike, can you see my screen? No, maybe not. Hey, let me try again.
We could see it. I don't know if you could make it a little bigger or sort of.
Let's see here. Are we seeing the grants report? I just want to make sure we're looking at the right screen here. One sec. Can everyone see the grants report?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. Katie Hornbeck, grants manager, briefly providing an update on the grants that we have applied for and the grants that we've been awarded since the last time that I was here. So from October 1st through the end of November. So the main thing that I want to point out in the grants applied section is that you might have noticed there were a couple where under program it was noted as TBD, pre-application only. And so what that means is that the Wildlife Conservation Board and the Coastal Conservancy have changed their process in that instead of doing requests for proposals for each of their various programs over the course of the year, it's a rolling pre-application, and we as the applicant don't select which grant program we think our project might fit into. It's like a one-pager pre-application that very briefly outlines the project and the funding request. And then the reviewers take 30, 60 days to review, and then we'll say, we think this project is eligible, go ahead and fill out the full application under this grant program. So that's just like a little bit more context around there. So what you might see is a lot of those pre-applications listed here, and then as we get the invites, I'll update it to full application invitation request. And we've already have received one, this item number 7 for the Eckley Pier and parking lot improvements. They just reached out to me last week saying, go ahead and submit a full application. Under grants awarded, the one that we received in this period was for the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, Measure AA. And as a reminder, the Restoration Authority did not do a solicitation or like a round 6 in 2022. Instead, they told applicants from 2021 who didn't get funded if they would like to have their applications reviewed and considered again, that we could resubmit with a brief update. So we resubmitted both of our applications from 2021, and this one was selected for funding. So this is a planning project out at McLaughlin East Shore. So that's so my brief update on applied and awarded, and then I can also give an update on the $3 million
Katie, we
she
lost you
froze.
for a bit. Your screen froze, I think. Can you hear us, Katie? I will see if she can dial back in if we don't get her back.
Okay, we'll just give her a minute to try to come back in, and then if Director Lane or Director Waspy have any questions. Oh. Okay, well, I guess we can go ahead and move on, and then if she is able to get back in, oh wait, here she comes. There she is, good.
Apologize for that. That's the first time that's happened to me in 2 years. I'm not sure where you lost me, but I'm happy. Maybe I'll just pause here and answer any questions, or I can jump in wherever you'd like.
Katie, we lost you as you were about to say what was going to happen with $3 million. So I think we want to hear that.
I left you on the hook. Okay. So with the 3 million, so that's going through state parks, and we were assigned a project officer. So they reached out to me. And even though the 3
It's okay.
Well, just to fill in, that's a really good sign that we have a program officer and it's coming through state parks. They're very, they're easier to work with than some of the other agencies. Sorry, Katie, I was just filling in. You were mentioning we were assigned a program officer.
Yes.
The 3 million for Bailey Road, is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Yes, I apologize. I'm going to see if I can jump on maybe my phone for better connectivity here, but
I did have a question.
Katie, you're okay for now. Do you want to, why don't we just keep going, and then if you get knocked off again, come back in on your phone.
Okay.
Director Lane?
Well, I was interested in your comment about the rolling grant application. So is that a positive thing or a negative thing, or maybe both?
Well, it's positive in that, you know, we don't have to wait around for a solicitation. So if, you know, we have several projects that we need funding for, and, you know, what I shared on the list are some examples, obviously, but, you know, typically we would have to wait, like the public access program for Wildlife Conservation Board is usually in the spring. So we would have to wait another 6 months, which could delay, you know, the start of the project really getting underway. So that I think is a real positive. And it also, I think, allows some flexibility on the grant agency's part to say, you know, we're interested in, we like your project, and we're interested in funding this, and this, and could pull potentially from a couple different fund sources instead of just being stuck to one. So in my mind, it is helpful because we can get some valuable feedback in that pre-application process and could resubmit maybe if they say, you know, you need to refine your budget or refine your scope. So it's very brand new. I mean, it's only a few months in, so I think we'll see, but it's nice getting responses much more quickly instead of waiting 6 months until we know whether or not we've gotten selected.
Thank you. Director Waspy, did you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Katie, for your report, and thanks for all the great work you're doing. I was sort of wondering, and I don't know if this is, well, what I'm wondering is the tree die-off that's occurring throughout the Park District and the pilot program, which was funded by, if I'm not mistaken, set-asides by our legislators for about $8 million, was going to do, well, I don't know how many, 80 or 100 acres or something like that in our pilot project. I think that's going full steam ahead. I'd love to see a report on that or have a site visit on that. But in anticipation of, well, the 1,500 acres of trees at last count, I think, we're only doing a few thousand. I mean, we've got a big problem. I'm wondering if there's any plan to go for more grants for this and plan ahead. I suspect it's going to be a successful project and a needed project, and wildfire is probably not going to get any less it'll still be on the front burner on everybody's mind. I'm wondering if is there a direction where go grants or set aside still? I don't think we can set aside for the whole project. I think we need some really grant funding and some help. And is there any plan to plan ahead?
Can you tell me again what project you were referring to? I missed that. It was at 8 million for which project?
Well, the tree mortality up in Anthony Chabot Park, the carbonator and the.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So we have the 10 million that went through CalRecycle, that particular grant, and then we have a Coastal Conservancy grant. We were recently awarded for 1 million to do work in the same area. That was the pilot program with the carbonator. And your question was, is there an opportunity?
Yeah, my question was, are we planning ahead? Because I think we can burn through that money quite quickly once we get this thing rolling. And the only thing that would stop us, I would guess, is lack of funding. And I'm wondering if we're planning ahead.
Yes. So I meet with our fire staff on a bi-monthly basis, sometimes even more frequently as grant programs are announced. But they have a work plan, and so I coordinate with them to make sure we're seeking funding for that, but also just looking a few years into the future. So and actually CAL FIRE just announced two grant programs that he'll have applications due in the spring. FEMA will have something, HMGP later in the spring. So and Coastal Conservancy as well has been really interested in funding our fuels work. So we're pursuing every avenue, and as things pop up, we apply and have we have a site visit planned with Coastal Conservancy in January, and as we're closing out a few grants with them, so we're doing some site visits, and part of that conversation will be what's coming up, what do you need funding for, and so we'll certainly be bringing up that.
Great, thank you very much.
And Director Waspy, wanted to just highlight that in our listening sessions with the wildfire team, including Katie and obviously our fire folks, it was identified that sometimes the quick infusion of funding, like the 10 million that Senators Skinner and Wachowski were able to obtain, that's very helpful, especially during an emergency situation such as the tree mortality. But it was identified that having funding that's spread out further and allows us to apply when we're ready is also very important. So just identifying the some of the funding in the state budget, which I'm sure Doug can speak to, created additional funds in existing grant programs and made new projects such as ecologically sensitive vegetation management eligible for some of those state funds. And that means we can go and apply at a pace where we can complete the work on time and not over max out our good teams and fire and stewardship.
All right, thank you.
Katie, thank you so much for your report. Very, very helpful. Appreciate all the work that goes into this.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on, we have both of our advocates here. Thank you for being here. We'll start with our federal advocate, Peter Umhofer.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Peter Umhofer, federal advocate. Wanted to touch on some legislative updates as the Congress wraps up the 117th Congress. We talked in the past about the defense authorization bill and the provisions that were being considered as part of that. The House passed the bill earlier in the month of December, and just yesterday the Senate passed the bill, and it's now on the way to the president. The final bill did not include the Port Chicago exoneration provision. This goes back to previous conversations we've had where the Senate had a different view than the House. The good thing is that there is a solution. The Navy has done this and done this recently and exonerated other Navy officials. And so where I would recommend the focus become is on the Navy Secretary and the White House. The legislative solution is perfectly appropriate, and Representative DeSalny will continue to reintroduce the bill and have the amendment included in the House Defense Authorization Bill next year. I can affirmatively say that, having had several conversations with them. So that's where I would, that's where I've been focusing, and I know others have as well, is in communicating more directly with the Navy Secretary and having our representatives and senators also weigh in with the Navy Secretary and the White House directly. So happy to answer questions on that now or after I finish my remarks. On the continuing resolution that continues to fund the government, there's negotiations still are continuing, and so Congress in the last 48 hours has passed a continuing funding resolution for the next 7 days to allow for Congress to complete its work on an omnibus appropriations bill, and that would fund programs for the fiscal year and all federal programs. President has obviously signed the bill. The current funding expires at midnight tonight. The president signed the bill this afternoon. So associated with the omnibus appropriations bill is, Eric had mentioned earlier, $3 million is likely to be included in there for the Port Chicago home of Thurgood Marshall, home of the Port Chicago 50 Regional Park Visitor Center, and associated planning and utilities associated with that. That is thanks to the leadership of Representative Mark DeSalny, including that community project funding in the what is called the transportation and housing appropriations section of the bill. I've been working closely with Representative Barbara Lee's office on language to be included in the defense bill or the omnibus bills related to cleanup of the Oakland Army base. That is work that will continue into next year, or we're not successful in achieving that in this particular go around for a variety of factors. There's also always at the end of the year efforts to include various lands bills and water bills that have passed maybe one body but not the other, or both the House and the Senate. And so there's negotiations that will continue through this weekend. About half the work is done in those negotiations, but more work needs to be done to reach resolution. And that set of bills then would be included as part of this end of the year funding bill that is becoming a fairly large train. Included in one of those bills would be a bill we've talked about in the past, Recovering America's Wildlife Act. Would include that bill would fund various wildlife conservation and habitat restoration programs at $1.3 billion a year. So it's a significant amount of money that would go directly to states. It's not a federal program. So it's significant, and there's a real commitment to try and get that done. You've heard maybe some mention of an outdoor recreation bill. It's a nice title, but it's very focused on pilot.
Well, it looks like we've lost Peter.
Yeah.
We'll give him a minute and then we might just have to move on, I guess.
We can reach out to him, but if you'd like to move forward with our state advocate, maybe when we get Peter back on, he can finish up after Doug is finished.
Sure. You want to go ahead, Doug?
Sure, my pleasure. Madam Chair, Directors, Doug Houston. So let's talk about the election, post-election. The legislature did reconvene on December 5th for a single day for swearing in ceremonies. There was one significant action taken during that time, and that was so ratification of the transition of speakers from the current speaker, Anthony Rendon, to the new speaker, Robert Rivas from Salinas. Everybody anticipated what the vote was going to be, and I think it was sort of the best of both worlds. It's going to create some stability going forward within the assembly, with an eye toward change. And I don't know as much as I'd like to know about the incoming speaker. I'm looking to be working with his office on some related legislation in the near future, so I'll have more to report in the near future on his priorities moving forward. But on the election itself, I don't know if you're aware of it, today is the required date to certify that the Secretary of State is certifying elections. There were really not that many big surprises. There weren't significant upsets in Congress. I don't think there was a single incumbent that was deposed. As you know, through the census process, we did lose a seat. Does Peter want to resume, or you want me to go ahead, Director? I think we got him back.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah, why don't we let Peter wrap up? Doug, thank you so much for jumping in and getting started at least, but we'll have Peter finish up, and then if you
My
can.
pleasure, of course.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Very much apologize. Sorry about that, Doug. I will just mention that, again, there's a lot of legislating happening at the end of the year. And so I just wanted to give a brief summary of that. Looking to next year, and a very much a divided government with a majority Republican House and a Democratic Senate. What would that mean? When the debt limit comes up in the spring, there is going to be a lot of negotiating that will happen. There is a strong desire by House Republicans to make significant cuts to the bills that have just passed, including the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill. So cuts to the programs and funding that we obviously have been talking a lot about, I think are going to be obviously discussed and could be vulnerable. Republicans have talked about changes to NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, which governs environmental reviews for federal projects, energy permitting, and issues related to the border. So the dynamics of inflation and the recession will obviously be a focus for some in the House, but nominations will be able to move through faster now in the Senate, and that will be helpful in terms of the current administration and their policy agenda they would like to pursue, because there's been a handful, a good number of people that have been confirmed, but not nearly enough. That's due to a variety of factors. I will mention also a nature-based solutions report was issued by the White House on November 8th. It's a 44-page report, and I think you will find that it tracks very closely with what the East Bay Regional Park District does on a daily basis. Wonderful things, highlighting the real importance of nature-based solutions as part of, and a real strong emphasis on it as part of their climate planning. This report was issued around the time of the United Nations climate change negotiations. There was a lot of discussion in the report about living shorelines, removing invasives, forest management, wetlands, urban forests, floodplain restoration, riparian buffers. Really exciting stuff, and I'm happy to share that more with you. The report and the administration highlighted a $25 billion commitment to nature-based solutions. So what are they planning to do? What are the actions they're planning to take? OMB is going to direct federal agencies to more fully account the value of nature in its regulatory and funding decisions. That's pretty significant. I think it could, we'll see what the details are, but knowing the people that are working on it, I think it's only going to benefit Park District as well as others that work on this and have been working on these kinds of issues for a long time. FEMA will be directed to consider nature-based solutions as alternatives for all projects going forward. There are also teams also been directed to look at nature-based solutions as part of the BRIC funding, which is hazardous mitigation funding. DoD is also being directed to look at nature-based solutions for its installations. So just to give you a quick sample of what's in that report, and didn't get a lot of attention because there's a lot of stuff going on in the last 3 months, but just wanted to share that with you. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Peter. A lot going on. Really exciting report. I'm going to let my directors ask any questions. Director Lane?
So if we could move back to the start of your comments, Peter. I'm of course interested in the $3 million for the Thurgood Marshall Visitor Center. Is that location for the funds a somewhat unusual one? And if so, what does that represent? Is DeSaulnier spending a lot of time on it?
It was done with a lot of work that I did in advance to inform their office about where the best opportunity was. So I wouldn't worry too much about where the funding is coming from. The good thing is we got funding, and they're committed to doing and putting in a request again next year. But we may need to collaborate with others in the delegation on that. Usually the way the funding works is once a project like this or a community funded project is signed into law as part of legislation, that money comes to that entity very quickly. There may be a little bit of due diligence, but it's nothing nearly like doing a grant and going through some lengthy review process and approval process. Good thing is that we've got some funding. Need to make sure it's used for the purposes we're talking about, but confident we'll be able to achieve that.
So the Navy isn't paying any attention to this, are they?
Short answer is correct. No, they're not paying much attention to this issue
Because
at the moment.
And when we read about the exoneration efforts, it seems to me that somebody in the Navy is paying close attention to that. So it's not going to slip through easily by any means.
Well, there's two things. There's obviously the funding for the visitor center, but then there's the exoneration. And I think it's literally people are talking two different languages and they don't understand each other, or they just want to do it the way they want to do it. Bottom line is this: the Navy has done this. They have a memo from the chief naval officer who exonerated an individual who happened to be a captain. And so we have an answer to this issue. It's just literally them putting pen to paper, and cutting and pasting the exoneration was done for another officer not too long ago. So the Navy doesn't really have any excuses as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
And Director Lane, and Peter, please correct me if I'm wrong, but just on the source of the funding for the DeSaulnier ask, the community project benefit asks can only be made from certain accounts. So it's not like the old days of earmarks where you could just kind of write in a carve out. It has to come out of an existing program. And so Peter was very creative in finding something in a different category than the Park Service that was eligible for both a community project benefit ask and also had money available for that ask. So that was something that that Peter worked really hard on, but it was very creative because we had to find something that would fit for us.
Okay, Director Waspy, do you have anything?
Just thank you, Peter, for your good work, and I look forward to seeing you this March. And it should be different this time. There's been COVID for the last few years, and a pretty hostile administration. I know that when we visit some of our friends in places like the National Park Service, some of those guys really didn't feel too comfortable. But I hope we pursue these guys again and can work some things out with them. I look forward to DC this year with a little more confidence.
I look forward to seeing you as well, and the rest of all the district attendees. I know that things are obviously much more open than they've been last couple of years. I can say that the House of Representatives will be fully open on January 3rd. House Republicans have said they're going to be opening the buildings back up to the public rather than you having to have an escort and an appointment to be allowed into the buildings. So at least one of the two houses will be fairly open. Unclear on what the Senate will decide to do. But it's been a security issue and staffing issue. But I also think to a certain extent that people have gotten used to this way of operating. It's not the best way to run a railroad, that's for sure, but people got used to it, so they really want to change it immediately.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Director Lane had one more thing.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say a special thank you to you, Peter, for helping look for creative ways for the Park District to be successful in Washington, and I've enjoyed working with you.
Dr. Lane, it's been a real honor to work with you as well, and I look forward to keeping in touch because you've taught me a lot along the way as well, and you've been a wonderful advocate for the Park District in Washington, D.C. and with federal representatives, so thank you.
Peter, thank you so much for your ongoing work on behalf of the Park District. Really appreciate your creativity and persistence in getting us what we need out there. So thank you so much. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. So we have Doug Houston again. Thank you so much. Your patience.
Continuing. So we're talking about the election, some of the fallout. In the state legislature, the Democrats picked up numbers. This ranks in the assembly swelled to 62 to 18. In the Senate, we are at 32 to 8. However, there is a bit of remaining drama as there is a recount underway in a Senate seat in the Central Valley, the Senate District 16, where an incumbent in Melissa Hurtado has a commanding lead of 20 votes over her Republican opponent. So I don't know when the dust is going to settle on that particular race. Could be a couple more weeks, but at least in the meantime, in this instance, we do have a 32 to 8 advantage for the Democrats in the Senate. To date, only one incumbent was unseated. It was a pretty important incumbent in a gentleman by the name of Ken Cooley here in Sacramento County. It was the most competitive seat in the state due to redistricting, and the reason why it's an important race was because he was the chair of what's called the Assembly Rules Committee. Assembly Rules does the chair assignments for policy committees and assigns committee members to the various committees, and so that has been delayed. It is my understanding in talking to the Speaker, Brendan's policy director, that they intend to identify their chairs for the policy committees by next week. And then the members of the various policy committees will fall into place probably in early January. So, but the thing about this new speakership arrangement is it's a pretty weird, challenging operating environment because there's a bit of an unspoken power sharing arrangement in place. between the existing speaker and the incoming speaker. But what I've learned and what I'm learning is, notwithstanding the fact that our entire delegation, with the exception of Mr. Lee, supported the new speaker in Robert Rivas, I'm confident that our delegation will get pretty choice committee assignments going forward and chair assignments just based on seniority. And just part of that unspoken power sharing agreement, that there is some conversations going on in terms of who's best suited to be chairing various committees going forward. So in the Senate, they're not going to be subject to this same sort of weird operating dynamic, in that pro tem and Tony Atkins is going to remain on. However, we're going to see increased jockeying between the members because she will be termed out next year. So I suspect, if not later this year, early next year, there will be her replacement installed. Not sure who that's going to be quite yet. Transitioning on to 30 by 30. So the Natural Resources Agency, they continues to busy themselves working with land trusts, local agencies, open space entities, private landowners, and they're refining and sort of adding content to some of the tools that they're using to identify the size and scope of lands that are protected, and to what degree these lands are protected by virtue of habitat fragmentation and the durability of these lands to endure climate change. They're looking at factors such as conservation easements versus fee title, and whether there's permitted mineral rights or on those lands, and grazing, and how does that impact again the durability and the protected nature of these lands. So they're right now they're immersed in preparing like a baseline information document that accounts for all these lands, and then just sort of use this to launch forward, moving forward to try to identify the best funding opportunities to try to meet its 30 by 30 goals and objectives moving forward. And as you know, last year's budget contained significant funding for nature-based solutions, 30 by 30, and climate resiliency investments. However, as will be the case with Access for All and Outdoors for All, which is a Governor Newsom first partner sponsored initiative to improve access to the outdoors in marginalized communities in particular throughout the state. A lot of those revenues that were identified in last year's budget are going to be vulnerable this year, given our $25 billion anticipated revenue shortfall. So a lot of stakeholder groups, and I would suspect me in my capacity working with you and others, will be earnestly trying to protect those new revenues to the best that we can. So look forward to working with the board and Eric, Lisa, and team on that. Been asked to talk about Proposition 68 and provide a little bit of an update. So I did take a look at the California Natural Resources Agency's update pie chart on amounts of money that have been allocated or spent relative to Prop 68, and appears as though about 80 to 85% of the monies that were available in the proceeds of 68 have been allocated. And I've identified, at least at this juncture, roughly about $10 million that's been awarded to the Park District. Part of the challenge, and I know this has been repeated probably ad nauseum over the course of the last couple of years for the district in trying to secure more funding, is by virtue of the fact that a lot of these monies were routed through disadvantaged communities, through the state park program. Roughly $500–600 million of the funding in Prop 68 was routed through this program. And if you're not entirely familiar how the monies are allocated through the SPPC, it's really predicated on a half-mile radius, densities of population, economic factors associated with what's in that half-mile radius, the demographics, And then the amount of park space also within that half-mile radius. So from what I've gathered, some of the challenges that we've had are just a lot of our projects, proposed projects, aren't really near population centers necessarily. They're embedded in or near adjacent green spaces. And because we're the Bay Area and they're using statewide median income factors, which is about 62,000 household, we're not entirely competitive because we are ranked against all other applicants throughout the state. So this has been a challenge in trying to talk through some of these factors to see if there isn't an opportunity to amend, particularly the definition of disadvantaged communities. We've been in conversation over the course of the last few years with MidPen and working with our delegation to see if we can broaden or expand that definition from statewide to sort of regional economic factors. And sort of transitioning on to other matters on this topic, as a matter of fact, I was approached just yesterday because of my work on Prop 68 by our new assembly member, Lori Wilson, who represents East County, to work with them. They want to advance a school bond, but they also want to include a parks component in that school bond. And they've reached out to me to work with them and work with other stakeholders on trying to draft language. And the reason being is they know of my relationship with Park District, and they would hope that I would be able to work with Eric and your GR team on language that makes sense, something around a $500 million allocation through this school bond. They'd like to route it through an existing program like the state parks program, but I've advised them that there needs to be some changes to that program to make it more equitable statewide, and particularly for the Park District. And they are very amenable to listening to recommendations around that. So some of my thoughts around this are investments in outdoor classrooms, for example, performing arts facilities, active recreation venues, and or workforce development venues as well, perhaps for California Conservation Corps, local corps, civic corps, and the like. So also on other matters, the other thing that I've been working on and recently had a conversation with Sean Dugan and Lisa on is proposed trail funding or trails legislation for next year. You might recall we worked on securing $35 million through the Trails and Greenways program, largest single investment in natural surface trails, probably in the country. We'd like to build off of that. I've got a lot of folks who are very interested in trying to create more sustainable funding around this, perhaps even for maintenance and operations of trails. That's going to be a little tricky. But in as much as we only spend as a state $1.7 million annually on non-motorized trails, natural surface trails, in a state that has a $300 billion budget, I think there's a lot of sympathy to move something forward. There is some existing funding sources that I've identified and perhaps some new dollars that might be able to be made available to help for investments in the Park District and other areas of the state. So I look forward to working with you again, the Ledge Committee, your board, your GR team in moving this legislation forward. And happy to field any questions that folks might have.
Doug, thank you so much for the report. Lot going on. Appreciate it. And Director Lane or Director Wasfi, did you have any questions or comments?
No, just thanks, Doug. And then I'll quote you. It might be a tough year with this $25 billion proposed projected shortfall. And then I'm happy that you're there with all your experience protecting what we've been promised or that we're looking for. And I'm very glad you're there, and I appreciate all your work.
My pleasure.
Do you have anything, Director Lane?
Well, and I just want to say thanks for your work. And thanks for keeping an eye on Prop 68. We worked hard on it, and so it's good if we can get some funds out of those pots that we helped design.
Very
Thanks
good.
again.
Absolutely, Director Lane.
And Director Lane, I know Katie's still on. I don't know if she wants to reference Prop 68 and some of the applications, but we have had some success getting some of the funding. So we'll continue to keep working on that.
I can very briefly highlight a few. What Doug just referenced, the Trails and Greenway program, we were awarded a $1.2 million grant from the California Natural Resources Agency for the Point Mulati Bay Trail project. And then the per capita money and the RIRE program, those were both Prop 68 dollars, and we cumulatively got a little over 6 million from both of those. And then we also got a green infrastructure grant for the Doolittle project, and that was for 1.4. So that's highlighting just a few. And from the Coastal Conservancy, I was just recently told that the 7 million acquisition grant for the Finley Ranch Road acquisition, they're still deciding if that's going to be Prop 68 or their general fund money, or perhaps a combination of both. So for what it's worth, but also just wanted to reiterate, as these programs are, the solicitations come out, we're actively applying for them. And if we're not selected, we get feedback and incorporate that into future applications so we can continue to refine and be competitive. But these are overscribed programs, sometimes by 5, 10 times what's available. So it's extremely competitive.
And just one quick note, there was one other grant that we secured working with stakeholders for a state parks operated by locals grant. And I believe it was 600,000, Katie, for McKay Avenue.
Yes, that was an award this year.
Yeah, appreciate the update. Thank you so much, Doug. Really appreciate all your work up there, and thank you also for the update on Prop 68. Very, very helpful. Appreciate your work on that as well.
My pleasure.
Okay. So I guess we are moving along now to the legislative program updates with Eric.
Yeah, thank you. This should be fairly brief. There's 2 federal bills, as Peter indicated, they're still in session. We've also received some notices from Doug's team about new state bills, but nothing has really popped up as something to make a recommendation on now that they're back in session. But on the federal side, there's this comprehensive bill regarding President Biden's climate objectives, both with regard to nature-based solutions and also with regard to ensuring that public lands are part of the solution and not being used as resource extraction lands. So really looking at limiting the amount of oil and drilling and leasing, really looking at quantifying GHG emissions through in the federal lands, and also developing some databases to monitor to ensure that that issues regarding both leases and GHG emissions are going down and not up. So a bill that really is pretty comprehensive and I think consistent with both the 30 by 30 goals of the state and federal level, but also with just protecting public public spaces. So recommending a support on that. And then the other one is one that I think is a particular note, both for what it does and also both for its author, the new representative from Alaska, who is the first Native Alaskan elected to Congress from that state. And the bill actually provides an opportunity for gateway communities to receive federal grants, like I recall the Preserve America grant. And it's really for communities like, I'm thinking Concord, Martinez, perhaps Danville with Eugene O'Neill, and Richmond with Rosie the Riveter, since there are units of the national park system in those communities. They could look at these Preserve America grants to help draw attention to the fact that the community is home to a unit of the national park. And I do think it's particularly exciting given the opportunities at Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home in the Port Chicago 50. So those are the two bills that we have recommendations on for support. And on the gateway legislation, we have supported similar legislation in the past. And then we were asked by legislative staff in Sacramento to adopt a support resolution for raising the administrative limit that we referenced earlier in the program overview. And I did want to highlight in the staff memo the research that Lisa was able to do regarding some of our board materials in the last 5 years. She actually went through every board agenda, which is amazing, to determine what percentage of our requests for funding of the board were in the range between 50,000 and 200,000. And the reason 200,000 was picked as the upper limit is because counties of population of 200,000 or more, their administrative limit for their city managers or for their county administrators is 200,000. So that means any contract that's 200,000 or less can be approved by the city manager without board material needing to be prepared. Over the 5 years of agendas, it was determined that 60 contracts were ongoing plan vegetation management and stewardship monitoring. 57 were administrative software support. 110 were maintenance of facilities. 72 were for operations work, largely probably equipment and vehicles. And then general office services were 8 contracts. So that's a total of 24% of all the board material prepared for contracts over the last 5 years. And there's a calculator that's been used in terms of determining staff time. And that was for the last 5 years amounts to about 23.22 million to process all the board material for those 24% of those grants. So just trying to make that case to the legislature. And then also general manager has asked that we include an escalator clause that is associated with regional inflation, cost of living inflation. So we are working with Mid-Peninsula on supporting and co-sponsoring the legislation, but would need, and to be clear, the $200,000 limit allows the board to authorize it. It doesn't require it. So it is the board's decision about what level, but it provides the opportunity for it to be increased to up to 200,000. And we are governed by statute, and our general counsel is here, so can comment on that. But there was specific legislation singling out Mid-Penn and East Bay Regional Park District to set our admin limit at 50,000. I don't know, about 7 years ago. So this would be essentially revisiting that number and to benefit the two agencies that were specifically identified in the previous legislation. So with that, those are our 3 recommendation items. If happy to answer any questions, and we would be looking for a support vote.
Great, thank you, Eric. Director Waspy or Director Lane, anything on this? Dennis, you're muted. No? Okay, I think
No.
he's saying no.
Oh, good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so do I have a motion then to recommend these to the board?
Go ahead. It's
Okay.
your last meeting.
Yeah, I will make that motion.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you like to call the roll?
Absolutely. Chair Eccles,
Aye.
Director Lane,
Aye.
Director Waspy.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Under projects and programs, we do have a spot here for the annual voter survey update. We did not, it has not been fielded yet. We are under contract with Tolchin Research, but their recommendation was to wait and let some of the after effects of this last election play out a little bit and potentially field something in January, early in the year. We have our kickoff meeting with them next week, and we'll keep the committee and board members posted. But we don't really have much more to update you on about that at this time. And our last item really are the 2 site visits that Flora was able to help us coordinate.
Not many comments on these site visits. Hello, Flora Chontosh, Legislative Assistant. But both were an excellent chance to have some discussion with sort of an intergovernmental group of folks. November 9th was a site visit to Dueling Canyon. Elected officials from Pleasanton participated, and Livermore, and Zone 7 Water Agency Board Member Olivia San Wong attended, all along with our board member Ann Wieskamp. And it was a beautiful day there at the future staging area right on Doolin Road, and a great chance for discussion about easements and access and different planning timelines. And then the following week on November 14th was one of the government affairs quarterly site visits. This site visit was focused on wildfire mitigation. A number of staff attended from federal, state, and local offices. And the site visit started at Reinhardt Redwood. We then caravaned to Anthony Chabot and discussed different ecologically sensitive vegetation management issues, as well as wildfire resilience issues. And staff members, legislative staff, were very engaged, and we're looking forward to continuing these quarterly site visits into 2023. That's it.
And on the site visits, we have quarterly opportunities for legislative staff to experience some of our work in our parks, and we'll be very excited to take staff out to see some of the great work that the pilot project is producing at Anthony Chabot. It's really remarkable what's already been done, and once the carbonator arrives, it'll be even more remarkable for folks to see. So we're looking forward to that. And then our next visit coming up is in January. It's a King Tide event for legislative staff, and we'll be down at Hayward Shoreline, hopefully with Director Waspy.
What date is that?
20th.
And
That site visit is set for Friday, January 20th. It will be in the morning, right during high tide, Friday the 20th.
Okay, thank you very much for those reports. Really appreciate it. Did either of the directors have any questions, comments?
Yeah, I anticipating that when McCosker is completed, that we would really work to see how many representatives of that long list of funders we could get to that opening, because it's pretty fabulous to see, and we might as well have a big party.
That sounds like
Already
a great recommendation, Director Lane. Thank you for that. Okay. Anything, Director Waspy?
Just that I think these site visits are incredibly valuable. I enjoy them. I think the legislators or the legislative staffs love getting out in the Park District and seeing what we have to offer. And we've got great stuff to offer, and we're doing great work. So I think I love continuing this, and I really, really look forward to the King Tide event on the 20th. Hope there's a big storm. So it looks very well. I hope it's a big one, big King Tide.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's nothing like getting people out to actually see what they're investing in and advocating for legislatively or otherwise. So, so thank you for organizing these. I agree, they're incredibly valuable. And yeah, thank you. So if there are no other matters, I think we're on to public comment.
Director Eccles, just to say that truly the parks and our staff sell themselves. So it really makes our job easier in terms of sharing with staff and electeds some of the challenges and opportunities we have. But it really is, it's the people in the parks that keep them moving forward, that really help us do our job. So just wanted to acknowledge that. And also wanted to make a comment. I should have under site visits and meetings that we are working to reschedule the Radke Award for Assemblymember Bauer Kahan. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Great, thank you. Okay, so do we have any public comment? I don't see anybody online.
No, that is correct, Chair, and we have not received any request for comment at this time.
Okay, well, very good. So thank you for sending out the articles in social media. I really appreciate you sending those and particularly sending them via email. So and to the whole board, it's very helpful to see everything that's going on and try to keep up with it all. Okay, so we're moving on then to board comments. Director Waspy or Director Lane?
I would just say thank you for a great year. You've done great work, and you continue to look for more great work. I'm very happy to be on it, and happy holidays to everybody. And Director Lane, it has been a pleasure. Your knowledge and your relationships with electeds has really made this committee a great one. I love it when we go to Washington DC and Mark DeSaulnier, what does he do? He parries with you and has great fun with you, and he seems to really enjoy you being there and your knowledge and your advice to him. So thanks very much.
Yeah, I want to thank you for the year and for the years. And I feel like we've improved in our communications over the years successfully. And thank to the Houstons for paying attention on behalf of the Park District in Sacramento. I think you've done a really good job, and hope you'll continue. And thank you again, Peter. I think we've been fortunate in our grants people too, Katie, and I just wanted to thank you for staying calm and pursuing the grants that we are able to get. I think people envy us for what we have found. And I found at one point when I went out to Brentwood, when we had when the state had their state commission adoption of the general plan, that I made a mistake in my comments and I said something about, thank you so much for the grants that you provided to the Park District. And I'd gotten a list of 2 or 3 of them. And then afterwards, people from the state said, well, I didn't realize that the Park District had done quite that well. And I thought, oh, well, I should have perhaps not mentioned it at the mic. But anyway, I know other agencies look to us and occasionally say, well, could you have your grant people do this grant for me? And we usually don't send them to our grant department, but I'm really proud of what the legislative group does. So thank you to everybody.
Yeah, thank you. I really want to express my heartfelt thanks for our legislative team, for Eric, for Yuli, for Flora, for Lisa, all of you, and of course our outstanding advocates, both Doug and Peter, and really all of the Park District staff who are involved in this process, and as Eric said, everyone who makes the Park District so easy to sell for investment. I'm really, it's a team effort, and really appreciate everybody's role in it. Along with, of course, our highest leadership team with our GM, Sabrina Landreth, and of course, our DGM, Dr. Alvarez, who's taken an increased role in our government affairs, and appreciate her help with all of this and her work on 30 by 30. It's very, very important. And of course, last but certainly not least, living legend director Beverly Lane. I just really want to thank you for your participation, and for all of your leadership over the years, and for just the example that you set in terms of an outstanding board member. Really, I've learned so much from you, and just really appreciate all of your hard work and preparation and successful advocacy over the years. Thank you. So happy holidays, everybody. Doug, go ahead.
No. Just happy
you're
holidays
just-
to
you're-
you.
Okay, I thought you were
Signing
raising your hand.
off. And
Happy
thanks so
holidays.
much, Beverly. So much. Very good. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Everyone.